The following video contains massive spoilers for The Breakfast Club and Persona 5, so if you haven't played those, maybe hit pause on this and come back once you have. They're both really good. So I've been a big fan of Persona for a while now. I got my start with the third entries in the series on the PSP and have ranted and raved about these games to anyone and everyone I could. So you could imagine how excited I was to hear that a new Persona game was hitting the PS4 after nearly 5 years of no new mainline entries. I was excited to say the least. What you have to understand is that the landscape of gaming in 2017 was good. Really good. You had huge releases like God of War, Breath of the Wild, and Nier Automata all vying to win that coveted Game of the Year award, and all had a real shot at the title. But while other gamers waited with bated breath for those titles, Persona 5 was what I wanted to play most that year, and it felt like I was the only person that did. Persona has always been niche. I mean, it's a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei, a series with very little fanfare outside of Japan. It's a mix of Japanese teen slice of life and demon-slaying Pokemon collectathon, so being called unique is an understatement. I expected in all these huge AAA releases that Persona 5 would be a small voice in the crowd. Good, yes, but with what it was competing with, how could it reach mainstream appeal when its predecessors couldn't? But somehow, some way, Persona 5 not only became one of the most talked about games of 2017, but even a contender for Game of the Year.
Get the fuck out of here! Somebody else, I said it myself.
Not that I wasn't happy to see Persona receive such praise and love, I was just kind of bewildered by it. Why had Persona 5 reached such widespread appeal when 3 and 4 were just as good? I mean, I've been playing them since I was 16 and no one in my circles plays them, and the only other people who recommend them are diehard JRPG fans. So how had Persona 5 done it, and as the Red Skull would say, "That's the power of the gods!" Like I said, I love Persona 5, and I tore through it in like a week, but I couldn't see why it was held in higher regard than any other game in the series. It's crazy to see how much it's blown up. I mean, it's got its own anime, manga, spin-offs, and a new director's cut, as well as having the protagonist Joker in Super Smash Bros. Of all things. So in order to decode why Persona 5 was so successful, I decided to do something I rarely do. Think. What was it that audiences latched onto so much with Persona 5? Was it the narrative, which mixed serious real-life problems with metaphysical psychology and subtext? Good, yes, but seeing as how I had to Google these terms and what they meant, and still struggled to pronounce them, I'm going to say no. Seriously, that last line took me 3 takes to get right. Was it the amazing soundtrack that ran the gambit of somber, relaxed, energetic, and really captured the essence of, oh yeah, bump that shit, that's my jam? Was it the UI that had character and personality oozing out of it, like Tetsuo and Akira? That's one for the anime fans. My brain just couldn't find the answer. I just couldn't think of why Persona had resonated with audience. Then one day, as I walked home, a shell of the man I once was for failing to realize anything about anything, it hit me. It, of course, being a bus. As I lay on the cold pavement, my limbs pointing the wrong directions, simple minds drifted from the now embedded in my skull AirPods, and that's when it clicked. Persona 5 is Japan's answer to The Breakfast Club. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kevin, you have lost your mind. While it is true that some brain matter escaped my cranium in the collision, and I can no longer remember my family's faces, I still have enough of the stuff to argue my case. Now, don't get me wrong, Persona 5 is not beat for beat the same as John Hughes' coming-of-age masterpiece. Not unless there's a cut with fetish gear and talking cats that I somehow missed. But rather, it's the mirroring of themes and ideas. Both focus on a high school setting, have a protagonist labelled as a delinquent and criminal, perception, identity, and misconception all play major roles in both narratives, and finally, both feature a core cast of individuals of varying interests and backgrounds, finding solace in their shared plight. Of course, the only differences are the BDSM gear and the anthropomorphic kitty that doubles as a minivan.
Autobots, transform and roll out!
But I digress. The Persona games have always dealt with issues of identity. I mean, hell, persona is a psychological term, so what made this game so special? I think the biggest reason why the Breakfast Club comparison rings so true is how the game represents the playable characters in terms of perception. You see, in the previous Persona games, your party was constructed of various individuals who had some standing in their social environments. You know, the clown, the jock, class president, the pretty girl, etc. While Persona 5 does have similar archetype, it subverts these tropes somewhat, and makes the characters you interact with ostracized from their given cliques. This is much the same in the Breakfast Club by the characters' own admission and labeling of each other. You've got the princess, the jock, the freak, the nerd, and the delinquent. Mirrored in Persona 5, we have the criminal, the troublemaker, the pretty girl, the eccentric, eccentric, the stickler, a shut-in, the rich girl, and a talking cat. I can't stress enough the fact that this game has a talking transformer cat in it. Now, while there are similarities between Persona 5 and The Breakfast Club, it's not so married to those similarities that it isn't willing to spice things up with some fresh new ideas. As I mentioned before, Persona 5 subverted its series' cliches by having characters pariahs of their groups rather than being a part of them. This is a stark contrast to Breakfast Club because, as far as we're aware, the cast are active parts of their assigned micro-communities. The reason they come together is due to them realizing that the only thing that separates them is their own biases towards the cliques they inhabit, and the film ends on a note of potential regression as come Monday.
What happens?
Are we still friends, you mean? We're friends now, that is.
While the movie does end on a cheery note, it's important to note the question is left ambiguous so as to allow us, the audience, to decide for ourselves what they'll choose come Monday. Couple that with the structure of the movie, and it is why it remains an endearing piece of cinema, along with its timeless settings and character depictions. Heck, characters like this are still seen in modern shows like Riverdale and the like.
Smell.
Gasoline. It's the only way we can truly start over, be purified.
Anyway, Persona 5's cast differs in that they don't really have friends outside the core group. Ryuji is a jock without a team, both figuratively and literally. Because of his actions, the track team was disbanded, so his old teammates hate him, and he's labelled a violent thug. Anne should be the pretty popular girl, but due to being an actual outsider to Japanese culture, as well as her spending time with the first villain of the game, she's viewed as an elitist, or at worst a slut. Yosuke is an eccentric gifted artist suffering from emotional abuse via his guardian, and as such has little social skills and defends a terrible person who's ultimately ruining his life for their own gain. Makoto is the school president that's vilified for being a suck-up willing to do anything to impress faculty and to get into a good school. In reality, she doesn't have a choice due to the impossibly high standards her sister sets for her. Haru is isolated by her wealthy father and her status as the rich girl, and after finishing her associated dungeons, things only get worse because of spoilers. Futaba is the best character, at me, and a hardcore nerd and skilled hacker, but due to a traumatic childhood, she's afraid of people. So the major difference is that initially the Breakfast Club maintains perceived notions and learns to look past them, whereas the Phantom Thieves have already suffered from ill-conceived notions about themselves and people jumping the gun on opinions. That's why there aren't any real growing pains when they all become friends. They know how bad it is to be mislabeled and judged, so the Phantom Thieves becomes the only place they can be themselves. The amazing thing about this is that I've only touched on the playable characters, and I've even left out like 2 of them. This notion of initial isolation and misunderstanding spreads to the NPCs you can befriend as well. Despite following the theme of misunderstanding and isolation, it never feels repeated or the same story over and over again, which when you realize the game has a total of 21 confidants with unique stories and issues, you can only react like this.
Dear God, it's beautiful.
As if the narrative brilliance wasn't enough, the game actively rewards you for taking part in the confident side stories. Now, this has been the case since the social link system was introduced in Persona 3, as having a closer bond with an individual allows you to create a better version of the persona type they're associated with. However, Persona 5 further refines this by allowing more tangible in-game benefits. Befriend the disgraced politician, your speaking improves, meaning you can recruit personas easier. Being Hifumi's pal allows you to switch out party members mid-battle, which can greatly alter battles in your favour. Do you like French maids? Well, by calling Kawakami, not only are you helping your teacher pay her debt, but it also allows you to build thief tools in class or have her do the more tedious tasks like laundry that take up an evening, better spent building social links, or doing literally anything besides laundry, which is the worst. My point is that while you may get hooked on the initial promise of a more powerful persona, the extra bonuses and engaging story keep you hooked, which is the reason diehard Persona fans love 5 as much as they do. For the casual fans, it was the familiar setting of high school and the struggle of identity and recognition, which resonated with fans the same way Breakfast Club did. Persona 5 and Breakfast Club soar not because they're trying to appeal to everyone, but by exploring themes and topics that could happen to anyone. It's not that Persona 5 is the best in terms of character, or that their struggles are inherently more interesting than previous games. Instead, the narrative elements present are so universally recognized that it's able to transcend time and culture. Like how Breakfast Club showed us that you're not just your surface characteristics, Persona 5 showed that we don't need to compromise who we are in order to find our niche. You could be a princess, a jock, a freak, a nerd, or a quantifiable psycho. You can still find friends, as long as you're willing to fight literal demons in whatever fetish gear you're secretly into. If you haven't checked it out, I urge you to play Persona 5 Royal, the director's cut of the game I mentioned, which adds a lot lot more content to the game, and honestly I think makes it even better than before, but I'm very biased because I really like this game. This game lets you have sex with your teacher while she's in a maid outfit.
Doctor, doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you.
10 out of 10. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around for the end of the video. What do you think? Am I reaching by comparing Persona 5 to John Hughes' 80s masterpiece? Or hey, maybe one of the other games in the series is, you know, your favorite, or this one underperformed. I'd love to hear more about it in the comments below. But yeah, thanks for liking, watching all the way through. Subscribe if you want to see more. I've got a couple other videos in the works. And yeah, thanks for stopping by.